Well,
What's the good news this year?
the good news is that I've been working on a book by the name The History of Libya for the last 2 or 3 years. And it's completed. It's out there.
Now it can be found anywhere.
Anyway,
On Amazon.
on Amazon,
Yeah.
different Barnes and Nobles, almost everybody that sells books.
Yeah. This year, did you have a baby this year? Or
Yeah,
just last year?
last year. But the baby was just a year, 3 days old now.
Yeah. But also, last year, when is your birthday?
Last year.
Which month?
November 13th last year.
So that's what
Well,
kind of,
yeah.
I kind of feel like it's this year. So yeah, November also, last year, you turned 50.
50.
You have a century, and you don't look 50.
I look this old.
You look very young. You're gonna have another 50 years. No one will.
No. Point of correction. 150 more years.
More than 50.
150 more to make it 200.
Yes.
That's what I want in life.
That's a good thing. What is the secret of your youth?
I don't think there's any secret, but the only thing I know that I do is I'm involved in sports, and I'm so blessed that I don't have any sickness.
You don't.
Not at all.
When was the last time you were in the hospital?
Yeah, I had flu and some 3 weeks ago. That's all. That's the. I think flu is general. We're in the season.
Yeah. So, Prof, let's dive into the. You said you just. There's a new book that just came out on Libya.
Yeah.
And you've been working on this book for 3 years.
For 3 years. Actually started in the summer of 2016.
Yes.
Yeah, summer of 2016.
But you told me you kind of already had material on Libya when you were undergrad.
Yeah, my interest in North Africa, Libya in particular, started a very long time ago. As an undergraduate, I studied classics.
Yes.
And Libya, Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia were part of what we regarded as part of the Roman world. So my interest started from that period, most especially because nobody gets to know that Libya was part of the Roman world. And many of the classical writers, classical philosophers, actually were Africans. And nobody would talk about them. So I was fascinated about this and picked interest in North Africa.
Okay. For what are maybe a few things people will take out from this book that they didn't know about Libya? Like the new findings you found out about Libya.
There's been a number of books concerning North Africa, concerning Libya in the last 50 years.
Yes.
But like history of humans in general, things keep changing. And in the particular case of Africa, everywhere you turn to in Africa, whether north, east, west, or whichever part of Africa, we have a particular period in the history of Africa where there were no written records. This pre-written record Africa, if I could use that term, has always thrown up new evidence day in, day out that keep shifting some of the things that we know. For instance, as an undergraduate, I learned about mankind migrating out of Africa to other parts of the world, most especially from East Africa. The received knowledge was that mankind dispersed from East Africa and spread widely across the whole of the continent of Africa before branching out to Asia, then Europe, then the Americas. But in the past 10 years, archaeologists, anthropologists, historians have turned out quite a lot of evidence showing that at different times in the history of mankind, human-like creatures sprouted, all inverted commas now, in different parts of Africa at different times, and that there were chances that these people didn't even know about the existence of one another. So as far as the case of Libya is concerned, the last 3 years, there has been quite a lot of discoveries in the desert, in Libya, showing that mankind actually originated from that area. That's not to disprove the fact that perhaps in areas around Cameroon, Nigeria, in East Africa, we have huge number of human-like creatures that moved out at different times in the past. But the new thing that this book plays before us is that different parts of Africa have played host to human-like creatures, and at different times they migrated out. They grew to become whatever they become, and they moved elsewhere. That's one. Another thing that my mind I can point out immediately to you is that since the Arab Spring, a whole lot has changed in North Africa, especially in the Arab world in general. In Tunisia, in Egypt, we have the Arab Spring. Then we suddenly found another one in Libya. The case of Egypt and Tunisia were different when we compare it with, say, the case of Libya. In the particular case of Libya, we saw for the first time the Arab Spring leading to the death or the assassination of a leader. Whereas in the other ones that we have seen so far, yes, it brought about change of government, but it has never led to the death of any leader, except in the case of Libya. So, after the attempt to remove Gaddafi was successful, Libya is not at peace. They are constantly at war. There are many Libyans in Libya today are still yearning for the Gaddafi days.
Yeah.
They wanted to go back to Gaddafi era, saying that, okay, there is no peace, there has been war and war. So this book talks about this, the complexities of this Libyan crisis, both from the angle, from the perspective of Libyans themselves, then the interventions from different actors, especially in the international society. Then talks about the dynamics, the different players, the kind of politics that were in play there. Then lastly, another thing that I think readers will find fascinating there, which for me is fascinating, is that if you pick any literature on Libya today, you'll be told that history of Libya is history of foreigners. Many went to the extent of denying Libyans ownership of even of their own history, saying that the people were Arabs, they were colonized by this. So this book adopted a totally different approach. In fact, I can boldly say that it's the first book that wrote the history of Libyans as originally Libyans' history, not the history of foreigners or invaders, whether Muslims or Italians or Phoenicians or Greeks in Libya. Those are the 3 or 4 key things that
you're talking about in this book.
Yeah, in the book.
How did you get a chance to travel to Libya?
Yes, on many occasions.
Working on this book.
Yeah, on many occasions I've had reasons to go to Libya. Let me also add that this is not the first work on Libya. I and 2 other persons wrote the customs and culture of Libya. That was before the Arab Spring. I was in Libya doing my field work when the Arab Spring in Libya began. So I was caught up in the crisis. So that gave me a window of opportunity to at least to establish some contact, to know 1 or 2 things about Libyans. But as far as this new book is concerned, I had to fall back on some of the contacts that I had in Libya. I had to go to Libya 3 times in the course of this 3 summers, trying to gather materials. Some, in a particular instance, I had to send some of my earliest draft to my colleagues in Libya to read through, let me hear their comments on some of the things that they have spoken, they have exchanged with me. So I've been going back and forth, not just going to Libya. I went there 3 times. They're also maintaining that strong contact between my informant and friends or network in general in Libya.
Yeah. If I may ask, is there, in this book, can people get a picture of actually what happened to Gaddafi?
Oh, yes. One of the key things that I try to do with the book is to show a 3-dimensional view to Gaddafi. More often than not, we hear the story of Gaddafi as being the madman of Africa. No. Authoritarian ruler. No, that's not Gaddafi. That's the way the West wanted us to see Gaddafi. That's not Gaddafi. Gaddafi, many may not know his history. He was just a common goat herder, young boy who had the opportunity of being sent to school, and he found himself in school at a time where Gamal Nasser became the president of Egypt. And through Radio Egypt, you have quite a lot of Arab nationalistic preachings that were spreading widely across the whole of the Arab world. That's one. He got his lessons in international politics from that area. He was just in high school, and he went on challenging his friends that, we can do this, we can change Libya. We cannot just sit down and allow outsiders to dictate. Who are these outsiders? Great Britain and United States. When Libya became independent, the idea of independence from colonial rule was not Libya's. It was because Italians or Italy lost out in World War II. So Libya being a colony of Italy, United Nations took it over. And therefore, at independence, United Nations gave Libya independence and instituted a monarchy over a group of people who never even knew kings. Just a couple of communities in the whole of the areas we call Libya now had kingdoms and kings during this period. So these different people were bundled together and were placed under the leadership of a king. Unfortunately, it didn't work well. It didn't work well in the sense that Libya at that time was totally poor. It had to depend on foreign donors. United States and Great Britain requested and obtained land in Libya where they built military bases. It was the proceeds of these military bases, whatever Libya got from these military bases, was what the king was left with to run the entire country. So many of these Libyans saw Americans and British in their land who keep doing all kinds of things. Gaddafi presented a clearer picture of the relationship between these military commanders in US bases, in British bases. As the leader of the country, Gaddafi drove to the bases and he was held at gunpoint. If you come in here, we shoot you. That's the height of insult. So things like this build up over a long period of time, and when Gaddafi and his men took over control in a military coup, the whole of Libya was happy. They wanted that change. So it's not a question of Gaddafi being a bad person. No, he wasn't. He wasn't a bad person. He was supported by his people. But something changed. And what changed was that at a certain period, the government took some steps, adopted some policies that worked against Libya. And I will point your attention to 2 that I talk essentially on. The issue of terrorism. There were instances of hijacking of planes, bombing of different places, most especially a discotheque in Germany. Then we have the Lockerbie bombing over Scotland. These 2 examples have always dominated all the arguments about Libya, about Gaddafi being a terrorist. Whereas he was caught in an international politics. What happened was that, yes, a number of evidence were presented that Libya did this, Libya did that. But we also have other evidence supporting the fact that Libya did not do all those things. So Gaddafi coming forward at later dates to say, okay, we accepted responsibility. He added the fact that the only thing that made Libya accept responsibility for those things were because of the sanctions. So when we see Gaddafi as a bad person, without understanding the context behind some of his actions, we will be telling a single story.
Yeah. A little bit kind of ahead of because what do you think Gaddafi would have done different if you would have been his advisor?
I will point his attention to two key things. I salute his courage when it comes to the economy of Libya. When oil was discovered, Gaddafi was just less than 30 years, but he coordinated the oil industry in Libya in such a way that the world has never seen. The people did exceedingly well, ensuring that the big seven that dominated crude oil businesses in the Arab world did not have inroad to Libya. That was superb. But the only thing that Gaddafi got wrong was adoption of socialism. Had it been Libya started out as a free market economy right from the beginning, some of these problems that ruined Gaddafi at the end of the day would not have happened. The second thing, and I will be very, very careful in talking about the politics that consumed him. If I happen to be his advisor when it comes to politics, there were a number of decisions taken that would have discouraged him from taking. Take for instance the case of Lockerbie bombing. For many years he refused to surrender two Libyans that were accused of carrying out the attack. He ought not to have delayed for those years. It led to the ruin of Libya. And that was the moment when the whole thing turned against Libya. And I'm saying this with the benefit of experience now. Nobody would have expected the outcome that we had. What happened? International outcry, economic sanctions, all kinds of sanctions. That even at the level of the United Nations, there were reports of thousands of people dying in Libya because they didn't have access to health care. Why? Because the United Nations, United States, and others led the United Nations to impose all kinds of sanctions on Libya. The very people who pick up arms during the Arab Spring were born during this period. So they never even know the good days of Gaddafi's rule. They were born during those crisis period, and they knew no other realities other than the fact that economic crises were ongoing in Libya. So they were the one who picked up arms against Gaddafi. They had no other way of looking at it other than to look at it from the perspective of Gaddafi against the West. Why was Gaddafi against the West? What are the contexts that led Gaddafi to take some of these decisions? None of these kids, with due respect to them, none of them knew all of this. So what I tried to do in the book is that I brought in some of the things Gaddafi had done before that made him a popular person, that made many people accept him in Libya, not just in Libya, across Africa. Take for instance, South Africa. In almost all countries of Africa where we have colonial rule, huge number of Libya's resources were pumped into those nations to ensure that they break away from colonial rule. If Gaddafi is so good as to realize that Africa has to be independent, it's commendable. As an African, I see that as a commendable thing. I see that as a commendable thing. And irrespective of the way we see him today, that fact cannot be changed.
Yeah, actually, I think I remember he helped a lot of African countries to gain their independence. He give them
South Africa,
support,
Nigeria, name them.
Even
Uganda asylum, yes.
For
During the
leaders.
Rwandan genocide, he was shouting, crying, asking everybody to come on board,
Yeah.
while the rest of the United Nations and others were silent.